And we're live. Well, sort
Hello
of. I
there.
don't know. Wait, let me see. Do we have comments? Are people here?
Yes, we do have a few comments.
Oh, all it says is sample comments for me. I must be banned from seeing the comments. Justin
Seriously.
banned me from the YouTube page again. All right, everybody. Well, I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works, and we have Justin Arment from JA Digitizing Studios. And we are both here representing the Embroidery Nerd. And today we will be talking about, well, I guess maybe talking. We're going to be going over some stuff from the book of Punch. Justin's got his copy right there. Man, I think it's going to bug me that I can't see any comments at all. Oof.
Really? I'll
Yeah.
grab a few here then. We got Gina coming from the OKC
Oh, man, you click on it and it pops up for me. Click on another one. And there's Matt.
and Matthew Hay from the great state of Texas. We got Barb coming in from north central Minnesota. And we got Doug saying finally. Yes, we missed a week. Sorry, Doug. Uh, coming from Los Angeles area, I believe.
It was
And
that
Matthew.
time
What's that?
zone thing. It was the time zone
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, we got a little bit messed up because us crazy people here in Arizona don't change time. So,
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, yes, Matthew has been without internet in his new house. So it has been hard for him to join us. We have Jennifer coming in from Texas as well. And we got some hellos coming in from a few people here. So there's the comments.
It's amazing. When you click on the comment, it loads. Until you click on the comment, nothing.
Hmm.
All right. Well, the other day, I got, I don't know, interesting. No, inspired. We'll go with inspired. I got inspired by one of the actual pages of the book that Bonnie had done and it's at the lead to chapter 24. And unlike Justin, I'm not cool and like pre-planned pictures or anything. So I just find the page and hold it up to the camera.
If you notice the title of our episode today, I named it "Old Dog's New Tricks."
Because I'm an
So
old dog. All right.
yes,
So this is actually the picture that I was referencing. And what it was is that's the chapter to the Madeira, the AS film. For those of you guys that aren't familiar with it, Madeira AS film, it's 100 micron. I want to say they call it badge film now. It's slightly, well, it's bumpy on one side and textured. And then on the other side, it is completely smooth. And it's not a wash away, it's actually a heat away. So you put it under your heat press at a certain temperature, and anything touching the press just kind of disappears.
hmm.
It's fantastic for putting patch edges on patches because then you can just kind of run a flame around it. You don't have to wash it out when you're appliquing like twill down to it. So that's primarily what I've used it for. Although I have done some freestanding patches in the past, and when I say past, I mean in the way back. That's actually how me and Matt met. Was Matt drove through the great state of Iowa. It's not the great state of Texas. It's the great state of Iowa. And he stopped by, and I gave him some of the Madeira film so he could create a patch in an awkward shape that wouldn't take forever to actually like try and sew and put a border on.
So we do have one question about that. Gina's asking, do you use a cover sheet of some sort on the press when you're pressing that heat?
So I always use some type of a cover sheet. I have silicone. What?
Sheets.
Well, it's not a sheet. It's like it forms to it, like it wraps around and it shrinks on one side, like it's got a band in it. It reminds me of a shower cap. So I'm just gonna
Is
call
it
it.
actually on the press? Oh, okay. So you have the ones that are on the heated
Yeah,
board.
it's like a shower cap. I pull it
Yeah.
around the corners and it sticks on. So we're just gonna call it the heat press shower cap. So I always kind of run one of those. I don't like to do anything on my heat press that is not covered. With the film, you kind of tear these out; they pop out, and then I use my infamous 3D Puff Pro tool to get into the hard parts.
Fancy.
By hard parts, I mean like the center of that R right there. Um, okay, it's an R. Just trust me. It looks like an R. So I use that to kind of cover, kind of poke out that hole. And then anything that's not disintegrated by the press, I just kind of fold it over and run a flame by it really quick. And that takes care of it. So I have been playing with that stuff for a little bit. See, I got a little nerd star. Maybe we'll give that out as a free file one day. Maybe we won't. And then I've been doing a little landscape patch thing. It's going to be out of focus because my camera doesn't autofocus. It's got a set focus. So I came up with this word. I was watching some Star Wars because I kind of watch Star Wars on my cartoons on my tablet while I'm working. And so I was watching I think it was called The Bad Batch, and somebody said resist, and I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. So I came up with this graphic. You guys are getting like the whole backstory and everything. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm going to share my entire screen. So we'll just make sure Justin doesn't send me inappropriate messages while we are on screen here. So I am sharing a screen without sharing my system. Good. I don't want to share my system sound. All right. Nope. Justin's big. We don't want Justin to be big. Go away, Justin. All right.
There you go.
So here we go. This is the art. I came in here and I deleted. I actually have a texture that goes over the top of the letters themselves, and I deleted that because it gets way too busy and you can't really see anything that's going on. So I'm going to recreate the applique file that I did for the hat. And show you guys kind of the steps that I took to generate that applique file, because this is layered. The S sits on top of the T, the I sits on top of the S, right? So everything to the left sits on top of everything to the right. So it couldn't be done like a normal hat file, I guess I would say. Justin will correct me if I'm wrong, but I had to plan it, and I had to kind of adjust things to make sure that it would work. And so we're going to go through that process now. And there's no more comments, right?
We have one that Eric is just saying that it's a great sample. Nice work, sir.
Oh, thank you.
And we have Robbie in from Las Vegas.
All right. So there we go. I don't know why I can't see comments, but here we are. So when I initially did this, the first thing that I did is I actually went in and I deleted all of the fills. If that doesn't sound fun. So generally I'll copy everything and I'll create a new design and I'll paste everything inside of the new design so that I don't lose any of the stuff that I worked so very hard to create. And then I'll come in here and I will actually delete the fills. So we'll grab each one of them from the color object sequence view. There we go. And now we're left with our outlines of our letters. These are the satin outlines that I used. And honestly, I don't really care about the center of the R because it's not relevant, right, in the applique. But I'm going to leave it in there, and I'm going to show you guys why I'm going to leave it in there here in a little bit. So I'm just going to group these two objects so that they move together. And then I kind of decided on the layering that I wanted to do. So if we come in here and we kind of start the layering process, we want the E to sit, and I'm going to hide off the art there. And setting the E, I wanted to make sure that everything was kind of the same height. There we go. And we'll move it. It helps if I hold down the right keys. So I'll move it here a little bit. And you can actually see in the pictures when you look at the pictures, this was something that was, I guess I'm going to call it a mistake by me. I don't like to admit that I make mistakes, but I made one. And you can see how the inside of this satin is actually just right on the edge of that. And so when I applicate it down, that little tip of that thing popped up and it didn't create a nice smooth. So something that I would do if I ever did this again is I'd either cut that corner a little bit wider with the tack down stitch, which you probably would have seen inside of the file that I had, or I would bump this up a little bit or down a little bit to actually get it a little bit more underneath. Justin, you can stop me if you have questions.
I actually saw that in the photos of the hat that you sent me, and I thought it gave it a cool little 3D effect to it, where that R was raised up.
You can, it's crazy because if like sitting here looking at it, you can see the 3D layering.
Mm-hmm.
But then you kind of you take the photos out and you don't see that as much. I don't know why. But needless to say, we'll continue on here. So I'm going to make sure that I overlap all of my letters. I want to line them up, either across the tops or across the bottoms so that everything's sitting roughly the same height. And we'll pull this
And I
in.
don't know if Jeff mentioned before, but he is using the Tajima DG17 software for this project.
Yes. In case if anybody had a question, there's
Yeah.
the answer. Yeah, I'm using Tajima DG17 right now. This can be done in any software, right? So like when we teach you guys this kind of stuff, when we show you this kind of stuff, it really is, if you can make a run stitch, if you can make a fill, and you can make a satin, you can do what we're showing you, right? The tools in the software just either make it slightly easier or slightly harder, depending on your level too. So I went and I used the align tool so I could line everything up by the tops. And I'm just debating. I think I want to tuck this whole side over here under a little bit more. And I'm just using, what do they call it? Nudge.
What is that? Alt in the arrows?
Alt in the arrows. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use Alt in the arrows to kind of move that over. Okay. So now we have our design. We have it kind of laid out the way that we want it to. Now we have to respect the, what would you call it? Inside out, bottom up
Mm-hmm.
kind of rule when you're going with hats. I most definitely use stabilizer. It is going to be an applique. It's going to be, just run stitches going through the hat, but stabilizer stabilizes the hat. It's not there to stabilize the stitches so much as it is to help kind of keep the crown and everything shifting together as it rotates around the cap driver. And that's this kind of important when you're trying to do an applique, because if I start with the T and then I start rolling across and it doesn't roll properly, then I'm going to have issues. So anytime I sew a hat, I don't care if it's structured or not, I always use stabilizer. I'm preaching to the choir. Justin does too.
Yes, absolutely.
So next up, we're going to look at this, and we have to go bottom up, kind of center out. And so the way that we can fake it, the way that we're going to fake this to kind of respect that is we're going to come over here, and I'm just going to start a run stitch center, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to make sure that I stay inside of the satin lines for the most part. Okay. When I go between letters, I'm going to jump across, but for the most part, I'm just going to run up, and I'm just doing a few stitches here to kind of flatten out the hat a little bit. And we'll come around. Super technical, as you guys can see. I'm making sure I measure exactly 4.83 gigahertz. No, I'm just kidding. We're just doing a run stitch, right? It's nothing crazy. I'm just trying to flatten out the hat, attach it to the stabilizer, because I don't want any movement in this thing at all. Or I want to be able to minimize as much movement as I can before it actually sews. So I'll come down here. I'll jump across here. Now this first color is going to be the same color as my hat. And I do that because even if I get a little bit off with my placement stitches, it's kind of like a regular applique, right? When you're doing placement, I want to.
That's another reason why Jeff's keeping those plotted points within those satins, just so you have that room for error for the shifting of the hat, or the registration, where it's not going all the way to the outer edges of those satins. So more than likely it's going to be hidden, but the fact that Jeff's going to run it in the same color as the hat, if there is that stray that gets sticking out, you're not going to see it. Doug made a comment about couldn't you just do universal underlay? This is the manual universal underlay that he's plotting right now.
Yep. So I mean, I could try to do underlay, but if I did underlay, it would do an underlay on the S, and then it would do the underlay on the E, and it would have to treat them all as separate objects.
Right.
Whereas this, where I'm coming in, I can treat them all as kind of one object, and I don't really have those issues.
And the fact that he's using a running stitch and he's plotting things manually, he's forcing the way it's going to travel. You're not, there's sometimes where you can get away with plotting points for just a fill and using a real light fill density without underlay, and that will work as a global underlay. But especially when you have a lot of nooks and crannies and stuff that you need to get around, if he were just to kind of plot a full fill shape and cut out where those gaps are in the letters, then you got to take into account where the software is going to calculate where to sew, where to travel, and it may not necessarily be perfectly center out like Jeff is doing.
I concur. That's all I got right now. All right, so I've done all of that running underlay. I'm going to turn it to the color black, and we will go to turn that on. I didn't change it to the color black. We're not going to talk about that. That was an epic failure. All right, so I changed it to the color black, and as you can see, like, it's super precise. No, I just threw down stitches. Let's be honest. Like, this is going to be an applique. It's going to move a little bit anyways, no matter what. So I'm just making sure that I get the hat nailed down, and now I've got this outlined, right? So this is going to be where my tack down is going to be, or not my tack down, my placement. And I can always come in here and I can just, adjust nodes a little bit. I can honestly tell you I did this in one shot, and it actually turned out pretty well. Just like that, right? It doesn't have to be super accurate. You just want to make sure that it's accurate enough that you can cover it, and then it's also going to be covered a little bit by the satin. Okay, and if you look at it, like if you hold the hat and you look at it and you can see some of the placements,
Right.
and that's just the way that it's going to be. So I'm going to grab a run stitch tool again. So I've got my placement for the T. I just tied it into that underlay. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to inset just a little bit. And I'm going to inset a little bit more than I typically would if this was a flat applique. I hope that makes sense. Because it's on a hat, I'm going to give it a little bit extra room.
What was the? We have a question here from Gina. What was the stitch length that you used on the global underlay?
I want to say it is 3 millimeters.
3.
Might be 3.5.
Yeah, I'm usually right around the 3.5. Again, you got to remember they're used to tack the hat down to the backing. You're not going for density. You don't need coverage as far as the look. This is all stitches that are going to be hidden by either the upper stitches or the patch itself, depending on the design. But of course, the patch here. But yeah, you don't want to hammer in 1.5 millimeter stitch lengths. And just drive up your stitch count, as well as asking for thread breaks when you're running on a hat with a really small stitch length.
All right, I'm going to bump this up here. I'm going to go to, I wanted a bean. There we go. That's what I wanted. Some days, Justin, you can't find it where it's supposed to be. So this is essentially going to be a triple run. It's going to start down here at the bottom. and it's going to tack down this letter. And I really should have recorded this when I was doing it, because it's actually pretty funny to watch me with my chopsticks, like nudging it a little to the left and a little to the right as it sews, especially when I get into these other letters. So I'm going to
Did you
turn.
did you use a little spray adhesive on your
No,
patches as well? No,
no.
really?
So I don't like to use spray adhesive inside of my house. Okay, we'll change that. My wife doesn't like me using spray adhesive inside of my house. And so I don't use spray adhesive. What I actually have, and I use a lot, is I have seam tape, 1/2 inch seam tape, which is like a double sided adhesive for when you're sewing. I'll put that, and it was like I'm cutting tiny pieces of seam tape for this letter so that I
Gotcha.
can put it on the back and I can peel it and I can stick it. And it did shift a little bit, but I wasn't all that worried about it. Because I'd just sew another hat if it didn't work, honestly. But this is something that it worked well enough that I would actually run this in production. I'm going to start my lock stitch up there, and we're going to go around the S kind of the same way. We'll jump around the outside edge here.
Now remember, Jeff is doing individual letters because he is applying individual letters at a time because of those overlaps, the look that he's going for. If this was all one big word that you don't have them touching or overlapping or whatnot, on a hat, you'd probably still want to do maybe 2 letters at a time for registration issues, but you wouldn't necessarily have to do 1 letter at a time like he is here.
Right. Like the key thing that Justin pointed out is this was 1 letter at a time. Very much so. So now I've got my placement. I'm going to turn that to black because that's the color of all my placements.
Matt says his flight doctor contributed his ex's love of Super 77 spray to my lack of brain cells.
I love
I
that.
can do it.
There you go. All right. So again, I'm going to run across here. And the only thing that I'm really changing on the inside is I'm shortening out the stitch length just a hair, and I'm running a triple
Gotcha.
stitch.
So the tool is the same as running stitch. It's just a setting that you're telling it to run it as a triple stitch. Was basically it's 1 forward,
1 back, 1 forward.
1 back, 1 forward every time that it plots that stitch. So instead of usually normal detail, fine detail on a design that you're using a running stitch, you would do just the normal 1 pass, but then you would come back and maybe do a second layer on that running stitch to bolden up that line. But the triple stitch is definitely something you want to use for the to tack down patches just to secure it.
And that was the primary concern when I was doing that, as I wanted to make sure that I was tacking down that letter, so that even if it got bumped, even if it got snagged, maybe it wouldn't come apart.
Right.
So now
And another bonus thing too is the way he designed this, having it being the red detail inside the letters, the red borders. He can use red thread to tack it down. You don't have to be as precise. I know a lot of times when you have really high contrasting border to patch material or the fill inside, um, the precision really has to be there, because if you are off, whether you decide to do it as the color as the border or the color is the inside color, either direction, you're really going to see that tack down stitch because of the high contrast.
Yep. And that's what I did on that piece, is I actually used the red thread, just like Justin was saying. I did inset that tack down. I guess we'll call it tack down, for lack of a better word. I did inset that a bit more than I normally would if I was doing a flat, because I wanted to make sure it would have really stood out if the triple stitch would have landed on the actual border itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Right.
didn't want it to land on that border at all. I wanted it to be very distinct and different so that you wouldn't get that. Um, you wouldn't see that, because the idea is that I'm sewing it to the hat, but you can't really see that I'm sewing it to a hat.
Mm-hmm. Now, the actual fill of the letters, was there just a textured like a motif that you used, or what was it?
It was a chain stitch. So
Chain stitch. Okay.
yeah, that would be
So
that would
the fact that he has a nice texture to that inside as well, and it being kind of
it was
stitches going every
directional.
direction. Yeah,
Yep. It was very
exactly.
directional. And I made it directional because I wanted it to hide it. It's actually
Yeah.
it's a faux chain stitch. The stitch length on it is about 2.5 millimeters in each of the triangles. And I'm not going to go over how I did that because it was very offset intensive, as well as after I got my offsets for my pattern, then I manually traced every spiral,
Oh wow.
which, if I went through and did that, then it would be I don't think people would be happy with me because we'd be here for a very long time. All right. So one of the things that I did that I'd probably do differently if I did in the future, but it helped me more than I thought it would, so I might not, is when I was doing, this S is going to overlap on this I. And when I was doing that, when I was digitizing the outline stitch, I actually did it so that it would run over the top of that I. So, it's a black placement stitch and it ran right over the top of this and came
Hmm.
around. Now, on the actual hat itself, it's not very noticeable. Negligent. Can't talk today. It's not very noticeable.
Negligible.
Yeah, unless if you actually like come in here and you start lifting and trying to actually look for it, and then you can see it in a couple of areas. The reason why I didn't think about it at the time was just because I was plotting for this. And the reason why I wouldn't do it would be obvious, because then if you actually look at the hat and you look on an angle, you won't see those black stitches running across the top of it, of the eye. But at the same time, I am old, and black stitches that shine on a new era hat that is black that also has shine to it, um, it might have taken me a little bit more time than I'd care to admit to line up those letters. And
So
so having that where it was more of a contrast, it was just a little bit easier to actually line up those.
see where it is. Gina is asking a question: in Wacom, would the offset tool be useful?
For doing the inside tack down,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be. um the reason why I'm not using it right now is because it's been a long day and my brain doesn't want to brain anymore, and I don't want to figure out the offset calculation for the pull compensation that I have applied to the letter.
Gotcha. And this is good too, to because if you are using a software that doesn't have the bells and whistles like the offset tool, Jeff is showing you how it's done manually. Again, depending on what software you're using, you might have the nice bells and whistles or the add-ons or the elements that you've added on to the more spendy softwares that can do this manually.
I like the way
Um,
you put that. The more spendy softwares.
yes.
Um, yeah, and it can depend on the level of software you have too, because if you don't have, I know some softwares don't have, like, you don't get the satin C tool or the
Hmm.
steel tool. If you're using a there we go. If you don't have the top levels. So sometimes it's looking at the level of software you have and how can you manipulate the objects or maybe do it in another software like Corel, not Adobe, um, to get these kind of shapes and get them in and convert it over. So in here I have the transform and I have the offset tool that I can throw an offset or a negative offset. And I can honestly say that the offset tools are probably my most used tools,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm constantly, especially when I get working with columns, um, there's satin steel tools or column C in Wilcom. Um, I start using those offsets to kind of plot around.
We have a question here. DJ Kev asks, "Are these satin outlines going to be puff or normal applique?" This is a normal applique, correct?
No.
Did you do 3D?
No. The satin is on the letter already.
Right, but you didn't create the patches as 3D puff.
No, I didn't create these patches as 3D Puff. I used the Madeira badge film, the AS 100 micron film,
Uh huh.
and these patches were completed completely. They've got the satin border on them. And then all I'm doing on the hat is I'm doing a placement stitch for the outside, and then I'm doing a tack down stitch in the middle. So
And the inside. So
what we
DJ
saw,
Kev, the look of it has 3D looks. If you saw Jeff's post in the group, the photos that he took of the hat, of course, there's some thickness and some texture from the patch itself, so it does give it that raised 3D look. It's not
right?
necessarily as big as 4 millimeter foam, but it gives it that look, especially where those letters overlap. It gives that real dimensional look.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be possible if I was trying to like applique this on the hat. It wouldn't be possible to get the overlap, the look of
Right,
an overlap, because
right,
there's really only one way that you can get that, and it's to have actual overlapping objects. So,
right.
but the patches were individually made. Well, not individually. I made them three at a time because that's what fit in my 5.5 inch mighty hoop,
Gotcha.
and then I sewed them out and popped them out.
And Salcedo, he did remark as well, converting steels to satins, then to lines, more precise. Yes, that's what we were just talking about. That Jeff is showing this how you would do this manually, because not everybody has the software with those capabilities, or the level of software like Jeff was saying with those capabilities. So instead of Jeff pushing a couple buttons and be done with this in 5 minutes and be like, "Yep, that's how you do it in Tajima," the level of Tajima DG that I have. He's just showing how this would be done manually. So he's doing all the thinking the software would have done using those tools.
There we go.
And there's some times where I found that even with the fancy tools, that there's only so much the tool can do, and there's limitations to how the tool can think. The whole argument of AI next to the human brain. Um, there's only so much that maybe the shape of the letter or the shape of the steel, it may do something really weird because the way it wants to calculate it, it crosses over itself and makes a loop at a corner, or whatever it may be. And there's times where either the tool itself isn't as accurate as you want it to be, or just how you're applying it to the design isn't necessarily going to work as well as you want. So to go in and make those small corrections or move those nodes here and there, a lot of times just doing it manually the first time, it saves you time. So I know I find myself doing things manually and then thinking to myself, "Oh, there's a tool for that," but I don't know.
It all
Maybe those.
depends on how fast you want to prototype,
Right, right,
right? So, like,
exactly.
I'm going around this. if I wanted to prototype this as a proof of concept, I would be using every automated tool available to get this file out as fast as possible.
Right.
And then, if my stitch angles are a little weird somewhere, something's not lining up, I'm just trying to get it out the door.
Right.
But I'm not. And we get Matt's message. He said, "You're not going to read my joke." So
I was ignoring you, Matt.
perfect. All right. So, yeah, generally when I do stuff and I want it to be more accurate, I tend to do it manually.
Yeah, so do I.
And I mean, honestly, like when I came in and I did the inside piece, it is very. I did a spiral, and I could probably show you on one letter in a little bit. Let's grab the eye.
And Gina made a comment that angles can play into it also. Yeah, that's where things could get kind of wonky depending on, how small the object is. I know I was using the offset tool the other day in converting an automatic outline into a satin C stitch. And there's an offset that you can apply to the satin C and Wilcom where it'll offset it to the outside or to the inside. And it wasn't moving no matter what direction I went. So I realized the amount of nodes and where the nodes were because it was a complicated shape. For whatever reason, the software wasn't recognizing the shape as it should. So I had to go in there, adjust some nodes, delete some nodes, kind of simplify the shape, and then the software was recognizing the offset that I was trying to give it.
Ta-da! I knew you'd all be super excited about my weird shape. So I used it. I did just what was suggested. I pulled it into a. There we go. I pulled it into converted it into a statin. So if you look here now, it's no longer a steel. And then I use the offset tool inside. And now that I've got that offset tool, that's when I came in here with an actual run stitch. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to come this way. Actually, I come this way. Like that. And then I came out. And this is how I pass the inside of the object.
For the chain stitch.
Yep, and then I applied the chain stitch on top of that. So, and I did this for every letter, and it took me a hot minute, right? But every other way I tried in the software wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. And so when I can't get the software to do what I want to do, or I run into a limitation, that's where I start coming in with the run stitch or even manual stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
and a lot of times, like Jeff did, he used that tool to kind of give him a framework where he knows that he can plot the points properly, but it just gives him something on screen for him to kind of trace because of those crazy other lines that it was putting out everywhere else.
Yep, it's the spacing, right? I know that my chain stitch motif is going to be this wide. I need this much space between my stitches. I use that offset tool to throw down a bunch of guidelines. Then I delete the ones that I'm not going to use or don't need. And now I'm left with the ones that I can use, and then I can draw over the top of it and pick what I want. And that's how I did all of the letters. And it took a little bit, right? Like, let's be honest, it's not the fastest, but
right.
it worked. So, all right, now that I've got
kids, pay attention in math if you want to work in embroidery.
There you go. All right, so right now I've got my my applique file kind of set up. I set up the properties of the tack down stitch on one of them, where I've got it running into a bean and I've got the shorter stitch length. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to copy my settings, and then I'm just going to select. And this is something that I found that I do a lot is I will set my settings after I digitize instead of before I digitize. And I don't know why I do it that way, but I do.
I mean, that just goes to show you that, the what's the term I'm looking for? The evolution of digitizing software. Because back in the day, like when you were plotting points, you had to know exactly what settings you're using beforehand. There was no going back and changing settings before on-screen digitizing with a lot of the tablet work. So the newer softwares, especially again the fancy dancy ones, um, you can go in and digitize all those running stitches. If you know that you're going to set the same setting to all of them, just select them all, change the settings, and it's all done at once. Or like Jeff said, change the setting on one, select the rest of them, and copy and paste the settings to them. So
And so now I'm just going in and I'm inserting my stops, and I can actually pull out. I put stops on this element and I didn't need to. So I'm just going to set that to a trim. So that's, I've got the objects and all the elements set up. And I've got all of my settings laid in there the way that I want them to. And now that I've got my applique file, I can go through and I can delete all of this because I don't need them anymore. Right? I have that in my separate file where I made each of the letters and then I sewed them out. And so now I have my applique file that I'm going to run on the machine. When I did this initially, I did scan the letters. Like I made them all and I laid them on a scanner with a ruler and I scanned them. And so I brought them in and made sure that they were all roughly the same size. And then I laid them all out and did it. But you guys don't necessarily need to see that step because I already did it and I know that it's going to work. So now we're just going to kind of run through the replay here, and I'll slow it down just a little bit. And you can see I'm kind of doing a global underlay, and then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do the outline for the T, and then I'm going to do the bean stitch on the T, and then it'll run the outline for the S, and the machine will stop. I can place the letter. It'll run the outside of that S, and then we'll do the next, stop, run the tack down on that as a 3-ply or a bean, and then we're going to do that again. And each letter, when I'm placing it, it overlaps the other letter a little bit. Spray adhesive would have been nice and probably would have held things a little better than my seam tape. But for the most part, I was able to keep my hands out of the road and leave it to sew
and
when it would come around. Like
you also have the argument, especially depending on how many garments you're doing or hats you're doing, the negative effects of spray tack is going to really gum up your needles. That's going to make a mess. So, yeah, some type of tape. I saw somebody in the comments saying that they used a glue stick.
I have done that before. The water soluble glue stick that you give kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, you're just trying to use that assistance. I know Jeff is brave enough that he'll get his chopsticks in there with his hands to hold down certain points. The fact that he is doing letter by letter, if you were doing this whole word all in one patch, across the front of the hat, God bless you. I hope that it lines up on the left side when you started on the right side.
Yep.
And that's where Jeff and I got into this in our class in Long Beach, and he actually was showing some calculations on how because of the curvature of the hat, and you're trying to do a square patch in the front of the hat. There's actually needs to be some where you measure where that hat fluctuation is going on the curvature of a hat. So you're actually digitizing it. You're not digitizing it just to the shape of a patch. You're taking to the calculation of that. the curvature of the hat. So
Yep. Because at the
yeah,
dome, right, when you think about it, you've got a circumference, right, and you're sewing around the circumference, and the circumference at the base of the hat is different than the circumference at the top of the hat, but it's still pivoting around the same point. And so
hmm
you end up like if you look at people's rectangles are an easy one to kind of spot. When you look at a
right,
rectangle on a hat, typically it sits kicked out just a little bit, right? And
hmm
it's because the distance is different when it's doing that curvature of a hat. Not a lot of people will adjust for it. They'll just kind of throw a rectangle and it'll look. You can see it. It's not something that you pay attention to until you actually pay attention to it, and
right,
it'll look a little bit off. And then there's you can adjust for that in the file itself. And when I do that adjustment, it's typically when I'm doing appliqué, right? If I'm appliquing a rectangle on a hat and I don't adjust the file for the actual size of the appliqué, you'll see that it'll run outside on the outside border of that. And if you want it to line up, you have to adjust for that. We did a live on it a long time ago. I don't remember when, and Adam was running the camera, and let's just say he was creative in his camera angles. It's the polite way I'm going to put it. But when I do this, I'm keeping to I chose a hat that doesn't. It's not the like what they call it mid profile like the flex fits, where
right,
it arcs a lot more right here. I did kind of a high profile hat, so there's less of a curve until you get up to the top. So that minimizes the amount of distortion that you're going to get on the letters. And then I ran the letters on here, and I made sure when I was laying down the placement stitches, when I was putting down the letters, that I could tell that the placement stitches were covered, right? I didn't want them to sit just on the outside edge. And there are places that you can see, and I can see that they do sit on just on the outside edge, but you can't see it against the hat, right? I mean,
right.
I'm sitting here with my face 4 inches away from it. I can see the line, but unless if I take a picture under a magnifying glass with this texture that's on this hat, because it's kind of got that diamond weave, you're not going to see that. Um,
And go out when you're out, and I do this all the time. Anytime I see anything embroidered, I'll grab it and I'll look at it and I'll see if there's placement lines on patches. I'll look at these things to see, you know, in my business, how precise do I need to be? And you see these retail brands out there, and of course, you have those brands like Nike and stuff like that. That are, typically you're not going to find those small little, I guess, mistakes or areas that could be shown. But a lot of times you do, and sometimes they're bad. They're
yep.
really out there. But just going to watching his process here and hear him talk about what kind of hat that he chose. He took a couple chapters out of the book Punch, was inspired, and if you think about it, every step of the way, you know, the beauty of being able to create a project on your own, and you're not just like commercial digitizing like both and Jeff and I do. We have to just do the logo, what's best for the garment that they're putting it on. But when you're creating something from scratch and you have the full idea in front of you, he's thinking about how those patches are going to be layered, how he's creating the patches, using the information from Punch that he read about. What kind of hat is going to work best for this particular process? What color thread he's going to be using, the fact that the patches themselves are all a single color, even though he's got different stitches, different dimensions. Just the photos that he shared in the group, you can totally see. Someone was actually asking if it was like metallic thread or some type of sheen to it. But just from start to finish, when you make these decisions, not only is the process itself going to be the best possible process for production, um, but the best possible process of how it's going to look in the end. So um, it's pretty cool just to kind of, I do that a lot with Jeff just because over the years, listening to his ideas and seeing stuff that he's done have just sparked some stuff like, oh, I see where he's going with this. I can apply that to this. And it takes me in a whole other direction. But just, yeah, I like doing that when I see Jeff creating new stuff. I listen.
The light bulbs go off.
Yeah, the light must go up. And we
Yeah.
have someone thanking for the book that, well, thank you for your order. I hope you enjoy it and get some good use out of it and get some inspiration.
Yeah. I will say this on the end of what Justin just stated is when I have complete control of the process, I can pick everything that's going to work best. And a lot of times when I do a project like this, I get messages from people that say, I want you to do this to my logo, or I want you to do this for me. And then they give me their logo and their logo just won't work for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't work for everything, but it does work for some things. And,
Right.
I did a full field 14-inch around the hat design before. And somebody said, oh, I want you to do that for my high school hats. And I did. But then they're like, it's a 45-minute sew time. I was like, yeah, it's a lot of stitches to go 14 inches around a hat.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, this actually, I'd probably run this in production. The process was fast enough, especially where I was able to generate the letters. But when you see stuff like, sometimes it's with puff. They'll see something cool in puff, say, hey, I want this done on my logo, and you get the lines and they're too thin. It's just not going to work. You have to be receptive if your digitizer comes back and says, hey, it's not a good candidate for it,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah, that's happened quite a bit with Jeff and I over the years when we've done our crazy 3D puff stuff. The fonts that we put out that have the serpent font that have the texture to it. It doesn't mean it could be applied to every single design out there.
yeah,
Um,
and I will tell you this: if your digitizer comes back and it's like, hey, it's not a good candidate, and you say no, do it anyways, we'll do it. But they usually come back and they're like, it doesn't look good, and it's like, yeah, because it wasn't a good candidate. So, um,
the cap is posted in the Embroidery Nerd closed group,
yep.
so some pictures posted there.
I think did I post it anywhere else? I think I just posted it there. No, I put it in the Discord too.
Okay.
Between the closed group and the Discord, I put them both there. Um, I could probably we could probably put them on the page really if we wanted to. But I took 3 or 4 photos. I actually had Justin, what would you call it, color correct, because the
Yeah.
photos I took were pretty washed out. But he helped me with the editing of the pictures, and it turned out pretty well. The ask on the metallic, when you're using this film, I don't know if you've ever seen when people put Mylar under an open fill.
Yes, I have seen that.
So when you're using this film, even if you're putting a full fill on it, when you hold it up to the light, you can actually see through it, right? Because it's plastic. There's not any fabric in there. You can see through. And so what the metallic look is it's actually the reflection of the light off of the plastic on the inside of the patch.
Let's see
So
here.
that was a
I
lot of
can
thought. Oh, you're gonna grab
quick,
pictures?
yeah, quickly grab this one picture that I just downloaded
All
as we
right,
were
let me go
talking.
ahead and I'll let you pull up your screen when you're ready to pull up your screen.
Yeah, that's weird. Oh, there it is.
Yep.
I was looking at yours.
Let's just go. Yeah, there you go.
Here we go.
So, and you
Yeah,
can see
so
there on that bottom of that, on the tip of that R, where that's kicked out and popped out. And that was because, again, I didn't plan that out as well, but it does kind of give it a nice a look. And then all the letters are layered across, going from the right side to the left side, and they all
yeah,
sit
the overlaps
each
there.
other. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think this is a really cool, different project that Jeff put out. And let's remove these here.
There we go. Yeah, it's something that's different. It's something, I got the processes. It was, I think, chapter 20 in the book on applique. I had the Madeira patches, which was chapter 24.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say 7, where it went over push and pull compensation, because when I was making these letters, you get a little bit more push and pull on them when you're embroidering on the plastic. You do use 2 layers, but you still get a little bit of push and pull more than you would expect. And then I know that it also goes over the caps where it talks about moving from the center out and bottom up. The only difference that I did is I did the global underlay, which isn't talked about in the book. That's something that Justin and I teach about to do fairly often.
Mm-hmm.
But if you guys are interested in the book, we do have another shipment coming in right now. It is going to be here probably, might be here Friday, maybe Monday or Tuesday. And we're going to be shipping those out right now. They're in pre order mode. And we do have some signed copies where Bonnie went to a trade show in Germany where the publisher was, and she signed 20 copies for us, and then they shipped those over with the last batch. So we do have some signed copies if you guys are interested in that as well.
I just dropped the link to the book in the comments, so go check it out if you haven't got it yet.
Yep, and I can't see it because Justin didn't click on it. That's okay. That's all right. But with that, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed kind of going over this. I hope that you learned something. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Embroidery Nerd group, or you can jump over to the Discord. You can find all of that at links.embnerd.com. And that has links to all of our socials where we're at. If you're interested in purchasing the book, that is on the embroiderynerd.com. I'm shipping them out usually when the orders come in. I get my son to help me, and he helps me package them all up and ship them. I don't think we have any announcements going on coming up here anytime soon. Nope.
Nope.
I didn't think so. But everybody, with that, I'm Jeff Fuller from Fuller Embroidery Works. We have Justin Armenta from JA Digitizing Studios. We're both here representing the Embroidery Nerd. We'd like to thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll catch you next time.
Good night, everybody.